We are anonymous. No faces, no flags, no permission slips. And tonight we are breaking down a story that does not just smell like corruption. It sounds like an institution cracking in real time. Because what is happening inside the Department of Justice right now is what an internal revolt looks like. When career prosecutors finally hit the line where their oath to the Constitution matters more than their paycheck, their title, or their future. This all explodes after the ICE shooting in Minneapolis, the fatal shooting of an American citizen, Renee Good. The key issue is simple and chilling. According to the reporting and the discussion you provided, the Department of Justice is refusing to investigate the ICE agent involved in the fatal shooting, even though investigating officer-involved shootings is standard protocol when deadly force is used. And at the same time, DOJ is trying to open an investigation into Renee Good's spouse, her widow, Becca Good, for what appears to be First Amendment protected conduct. Let that land. A federal officer kills an American citizen, and DOJ does not want to investigate the shooter. But DOJ does want to investigate the grieving spouse. That is not justice. That is intimidation wearing a badge. That is why 6 federal prosecutors resigned in protest from the U.S. Attorney's Office in Minnesota. Not 6 random employees, 6 federal prosecutors, including leadership. They resigned because they refused to be complicit. They resigned because the DOJ position, as described, was upside down. And one of the speakers said something that should alarm every person who still believes the Justice Department belongs to the people. It feels like DOJ has been turned against the American people. They did not say that lightly. They said it because the pattern here is not subtle. In connection with a fatal shooting by an ICE officer and the attempt to investigate the victim's spouse, the department appears to be shielding power and punishing dissent. Now listen to what Becca Good said about the moment before the shooting. She said she and her wife Renee stopped to support their neighbors when they got into a tense confrontation with ICE agents that led to the shooting. She said we had whistles, they had guns. Whistles, guns, and now the Department of Justice wants to investigate the widow of the woman who was shot and killed because she was out there with whistles, trying to alert people in the area to danger, the danger they believed they were likely to encounter. The danger that comes when enforcement becomes reckless and unaccountable. So what is the goal of DOJ here? Because the natural reaction is, no judge is going to let this go anywhere. There is no solid case. There is no real evidence of a crime by the widow, and that is exactly the point. This is not about winning in court. This is about sending a message, and the message was described clearly. The message intended, and the message being received, is shut up. Do not oppose what we are trying to do. Do not speak up. Do not draw attention to what is happening in your streets. If you do, you will be next. If it is not physical force, it will be a criminal investigation with no evidence behind it. Everybody shut up and take it. Lay down. Feel defeated. Be fearful. And do not exercise your constitutional rights. That is the atmosphere this story describes. That is why prosecutors are walking out. Now let us talk about who resigned, because it matters. Among the 6 prosecutors is the number 2 person in that U.S. Attorney's Office, a longtime federal prosecutor named Joseph Thompson. Also among them is the chief of the Violent Crimes and Major Crimes section, Thomas Calhoun Lopez. These are not political influencers. These are career public servants, people who normally stay in the system and do the work. And here is what Trump supporters love to ignore. When career prosecutors resign in protest, it is because they believe they are being asked to do things that are unethical, immoral, against the rule of law, and against the Constitution. They also said something else that is important. Resigning is not enough. Quitting in protest matters, but the public needs transparency. The public needs to know what is happening inside DOJ that is leading to decisions like refusing to investigate a fatal shooting while aiming investigative power at the victim's spouse. And this revolt is not limited to Minnesota. In Washington, D.C., 4 prosecutors resigned from the civil rights section as well. The reason given is that the head of that section, Harmeet Dillon, was prohibiting them from conducting an investigation of this fatal shooting. Again, think about what civil rights prosecutors exist to do. Their role, as described, is to investigate official conduct, including deadly force, to determine if the law was broken, if policy was defied, if de-escalation failed, and if deadly force was used without basis. That is not optional. That is core. The previous leader of the civil rights work under Joe Biden, Kristen Clark, described investigating officials to determine if they broke the law, defied policy, failed to de-escalate, and resorted to deadly force without basis as one of the division's most solemn duties. That was quoted for a reason, to underline how serious it is when current leadership blocks that duty. Now, the original discussion also pointed to what appears to be a disturbing pattern. It said DOJ may be declining to share a significant amount of relevant evidence with state authorities who want to investigate fully and fairly. And it suggested the reason leadership does not want a full investigation is obvious. A full investigation might reveal the officer broke the law. The discussion then laid out what, based on what is known so far, appears troubling. There is a policy that federal officers do not position themselves in front of a vehicle because of the inherent danger. There was a claim that the officer escalated rather than de-escalated, and there was a claim that after the first shot, additional shots were fired into the passenger compartment toward Renee Good. We do not need to overstate anything. The key point is this. The prosecutors believed the facts required investigation. Leadership allegedly refused. That refusal was serious enough that prosecutors resigned. Then the conversation moved to a question that matters for transparency. Can these former prosecutors speak out? Are they bound to secrecy? The answer given was careful. They cannot disclose grand jury information, but the speaker noted that reporting suggests DOJ is not conducting an investigation, which likely means no federal grand jury activity on this matter. They also said former prosecutors should avoid interfering with any pending investigation or anyone's rights. But if DOJ is not investigating, the argument is that there is less risk that speaking about internal decision-making would interfere with anything. The conclusion was that now we need transparency. We need to expose what is going on inside DOJ that is leading to these decisions. Then came one of the most practical and important ideas in the entire discussion. Could state investigators and state prosecutors in Minnesota hire these former federal prosecutors to continue the work they wanted to do, to actually conduct a real good faith investigation into the ICE officer involved? The answer was yes. They can, and there is precedent for it. The discussion referenced a recent example where a former DOJ prosecutor left and then worked with state prosecutors on a major case. The broader point was that people leaving DOJ, whether terminated or resigning on principle, are being hired by state prosecutor offices and state attorneys general offices across the country. In other words, Trump and Bondi may be hollowing out the federal department, but the expertise is not disappearing. It is moving to the state level, where it can still be used to pursue accountability. And this case, the speaker argued, would be a perfect instance. Former federal prosecutors could cross over to a Minnesota state prosecutor's office and help ensure justice is done. And justice here means a full, fair, thorough investigation of the fatal shooting, not an investigation into the victim's spouse for engaging in constitutionally protected protest activity. Now let us pull the lens back and say what needs to be said about Trump. Donald Trump has always treated law enforcement like a tool for personal power. He does not want independent institutions. He wants obedient institutions. He does not want prosecutors who ask, "What does the evidence say?" He wants prosecutors who ask, "Who does Trump want punished today?" That is why stories like this keep appearing. This is why the public keeps hearing about prosecutors resigning. Because you cannot run a justice department like a political hit squad and expect career attorneys to stay quiet forever. Some will stay, some will adapt, but the ones who still believe in their oath will leave, and sometimes they will leave loudly. And make no mistake, this story is not just about one office. It is about whether the rule of law still has guardians inside institutions that are being pressured from the top. When you see prosecutors resigning because they believe the department is refusing to investigate the killing of an American citizen while targeting the citizen's spouse, you are watching a crisis of legitimacy. So here is what matters most, and what is easiest to prove and understand from the facts you provided. 6 prosecutors resigned in Minnesota in protest. 4 prosecutors resigned in the civil rights section in Washington. The resignations are connected to a refusal to investigate the ICE agent involved in the fatal shooting of Renee Good and an apparent move to investigate the widow Becca Good for protest-related conduct. That is the core. That is the story. That is the scandal. And here is the warning. If the DOJ is used to chill protest, if it is used to punish people for blowing whistles while shielding the people who pull triggers, then the Constitution becomes a suggestion, not a guarantee. And that is exactly the kind of country Trump dreams of, one where the law is a club, not a shield. We are anonymous. No faces, no flags, no permission slips. If you want more breakdowns like this, subscribe, share this video, and keep your eyes on the people in power. Because silence is what they are counting on.